when you read the letters, 1st, 2nd Corinthians, the letter to the Ephesians, Paul's writing to actual people in an actual place and time who are figuring things out along the way, who have had this encounter with God and are learning what it means to be family and learning what it means to be community in a social environment where not everybody is living like that. So people are figuring things out. And when Paul's writing to the people, he actually writes out a prayer. And starting in verse 16, he says, I pray that out of his glorious riches, he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all of the saints to grasp how wide and how long and how high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of the fullness of God. See, Paul's desire is that the people will become grounded and rooted in love through deep experiences of and encounters with God. His main concern is not that the people would know more about God or continue to gain more information of God, but his desire is that the people would actually be rooted as a result of them encountering the love of God deeply. And just because any one of us might affirm conceptually or affirm verbally that we believe in God's love, meaning all of us have been a part of a church for a while, or most of us have, for those of us who have been connected and those of us who have been Christians, we would say, of course I believe in God's love. Of course I believe that God's love is unconditional. Of course we believe those things. But just because we believe those things in our mind does not necessarily mean that we are encountering God's love and thus experiencing that love deeply in our lives. See, because this experience, when you actually are encountering God in that way, it always leads to transformation. This experience always leads to deeper experiences of love. And this experience always leads to freedom and healing and wholeness. So here's an example. I could tell you all about my friend. His name is Daniel Dancy, but we used to call him Beetle when we were growing up. So I could tell you all about Beetle. I could tell you how he was born to a drug-addicted mother and taken from his mom when he was 9 months old. I could tell you about the first time that he ever took a drink of alcohol, because I'm the one who put it in his hand when he was really young. I could tell you about when he first started selling drugs, because I'm the person who taught him to do it when we were both really young. I could tell you about how he joined a gang when he was 18. I could tell you how he's constantly going in and out of jail, how he got shot. I can tell you about the time that he called me in the middle of the night to bring him food because he was starving because his addiction to crystal meth actually left him homeless on the streets. And as a result of me telling you all about him, you actually know enough information about him to actually go tell other people. You could go tell people the things that I've told you about Beetle, but just because I've told you about Beetle, it does not actually mean that you know Beetle. You might know information about Beetle, but it doesn't actually mean you've ever experienced what it's like to look into his eyes. It doesn't mean you've actually ever known what it's like to be in his presence and experience the change that comes from being around the pain that's going on in his life. And Paul's desire for these early Christians who were figuring things out, these early Christians who were struggling with what it means to forgive, these early Christians who were struggling with what it means to judge. I mean, obviously these early Christians had nothing in common with any of us in this room today, but they were struggling. We don't really have to deal with those things, but they were struggling with those things. His desire for them was that they would encounter and know God personally, and not just know God in their mind, and not just have the right beliefs about God. And although there can be a variety of reasons why this may be the case, why we might actually have the right information about God without actually encountering and meeting God, I would like to briefly discuss one that I've realized as I've gotten older is always the issue, or so often it's the issue that actually prevents people from experiencing and encountering God in this deep way. And it's that sometimes our understanding of God actually prevents us from experiencing God. Sometimes our understanding of what God's like actually prevents us from experiencing who God is. See, we watched that video, and it was all about the growth of the church, but specifically the Foursquare Church. And they talked about how in 1923, the Angelus Temple was founded. It's a church in downtown LA. It's a church in Echo Park, which is now based on crime and based on violence, is an extremely violent place to live in now. There's a lot of gangs around there. The friend I was talking about actually would be hanging around in neighborhoods similar to that. But when I was living in LA before Christine and I got married, I was working in a group home for boys there. And the group home was like a place for boys who, it was like an alternative to them going to juvenile hall. It was like an alternative to these boys, instead of going to jail, they could come to this place. Whether it was drugs or gangs or violence, whether they had been caught up in the system their whole life, a lot of them would end up in this place. And I was working in there with them. And there was this one kid, Ryan, who I actually still stay in touch with to this day. I remember we were sitting down one time, and he started talking to me about love, and he started talking to me about girls, and he started talking about relationships. And he's like, Kev, like, what if there's a girl that I actually like? You know, I don't just want to use, I don't just want to manipulate her, I don't just want to take advantage of her, but there's a girl I actually like, and I want to spend time with her, and I want to get to know her, and I want to really care about her. He's like, you know what the problem is? The girls, they don't actually want that guy. They actually want the guys who are going to treat them bad. They want the guys who are going to use them. They want the guys who are going to manipulate them. And he's like, why is that? He's like, these very girls who I actually would be interested in getting to know and care about, he's like, they have no interest in that because their desires for something else. Something, the very thing that people are telling me is not actually the way about going, the way to actually go about dating. And I told him, you know, thinking about the kind of environment he was in and thinking about the kind of girls he would be around as a result who were living a similar lifestyle to him, I remember telling him that a lot of these girls' understanding of love is so distorted as a result of all of the models of love that they've seen in their lives. All of the relationships they've seen in their lives, they've seen love in abusive ways, they've seen love in manipulative ways. So when a real love comes along, and when a real embodiment of what it means to really care about somebody comes along, they can't actually recognize it as love because their understanding of what love in relationships is prevents them experiencing real love and real care when it's actually in their presence. And that's the point that I'm making. It can be the same with us and God. Sometimes our understanding of God is so limited that when God actually shows up and is present, we're unable to identify it because we have a misunderstanding of what that love is supposed to be like.